What is going on, guys? It's Mew here, back with another first Descendant video. And in this video, we're going to be going over a bit less of a popular build. However, I do think it's a really good build. It has some very good use cases where it's actually extremely strong and extremely efficient to use. So I wanted to go over the build that I've been using for Bionic Fuel Bunny, kind of give you guys more information on that and kind of when you would want to use this build, as well as just showcasing the build itself. We did just recently also get 2 new shield mods. One of them is pretty garbage. However, the other one actually came in handy with this build and makes it a lot better as well. So I think the timing on this is pretty good. And real quick, before I actually get into the build itself, I do want to go over just a couple things, answer a couple questions that you guys may have in regards to this build. I know it's a less popular one, so there may be some questions out there. I have done a lot of testing with it. Now, one thing I did make sure to test is defense with shields. I wasn't 100% sure that defense is working with shields, so I did do tests on that, and defense does indeed work with shields. So because of this, we can actually make ourselves a pretty tanky, especially for what we're going to be doing with this build, which is primarily going to be farming. You're not really going to want to take this into a bossing scenario. I've pretty much run it through all the farming content in the game, including invasions and the 250% dungeons, and I've been able to farm everything without much trouble, and it's very, very efficient, as well as just very nice and easy to use. Another question you may be asking is, well, why use this over just using normal Bunny with her just normal 3 ability that does the large circular AoE? Why would you use Bionic Fuel instead? Well, there's a couple reasons, but the first big reason is definitely just ease of use. This build is very, very comfortable to use. It can clear all content in the game currently if you build it right, and also does pretty much exactly the same damage as if you were to build a regular Bunny setup. Not only this, it actually ends up letting you be tankier than a regular Bunny setup, and I'll show you guys kind of why that is. But you can actually be quite a lot tankier with Bionic Fuel Bunny than with just regular Bunny, as well as with high voltage Bunny. And then honestly, the last reason, and this is something personal to me at least, is it's just really fun to use. It's very comfortable. You can kind of just run around, jump around, hop around. Everything's just dying around you. You don't have to worry about your mana whatsoever. It's just a good time. So I really like this build. I've seen a lot of people kind of asking about it lately, especially with the new shield mod. So anyways, let's get into the actual build itself. And there is a lot to cover. So the modules are important on both Bunny and your weapon, as well as your components are going to be important, and your reactor as well. So all right, and let's get into the build here. So obviously the first mod we're going to be using is Bionic Fuel. Now essentially what this does, for those of you who don't know, is rather than using MP, your dash ability is instead going to consume HP, and it's going to bring you down to about 10% HP before it stops consuming HP. Essentially what this means is that we're going to have to build around shield to be able to survive using this mod. Exactly what we're going to be doing. Now for your sub module, this is actually somewhat important in this build, and you'll understand that in a bit, but definitely make sure you're using a grappling hook that has a charge on it. Ideally, I would just recommend using long distance maneuvering, but you can use the shorter version as well with 3 charges. Is actually going to help you sustain if you ever need it. It's kind of like a little emergency button, but at the end of the day, it comes down to personal preference. I will be using long distance maneuvering with this. However, we are not using this for bossing. So now, like I said, we're going to be building around shield rather than HP. And that is because, again, this is just draining our HP. So there is actually no reason to build HP. It's just going to get drained away very quickly. If you look at the sprint here, it takes away 15% of our HP every second. So really no reason to actually build max HP. However, you can see that I have an HP mod here. Now, why is that? Well, it is because of this mod here called Overwhelming Shield. What this does is gives us more shield depending on our max health. So the way I've set this up is to basically optimize it so that we can get as much shield as possible with 3 mods. And those mods are going to be Stim Accelerant. Because we're using Bionic Fuel, we're not actually using mana to do anything. So we can just get rid of the max mana without really losing out on anything. And we get that big HP increase. And we're also going to take increased shield just to obviously get as much shield possible without any kind of negative side. And then we're going to take Overwhelming Shield on top of that to get shield value out of our Stim Accelerant. You may be thinking, why not just put another shield mod here? And it actually works out to where having Overwhelming Shield with a HP mod is going to give you more shield rather than having a 3 shield mod. So this is actually the most bang for your buck in terms of shields. Now, on top of the actual shield itself, we are going to need a form of sustain, and this is where our new mod comes in, Biosync Shield. Now, this mod does drop from Dead Ride. This mod did take me about 10 clears to get, so it can be a little bit of a pain. However, if you do not have this mod, you do have another option, which is going to be a shield collector. collector. Now it does take a lot more capacity, but if you are having trouble getting biosync shield, you can use shield collector, but it's not going to be nearly as effective. So I would definitely try to farm this out from Dead Bride as soon as possible to make this build as efficient as possible. And that also lets you save on your bionic fuel as well, because you can see here we have 5 extra capacity. You could save a catalyst here if you want. So now that's kind of it for our survivability and sustain. Now there is going to be more on that, but we're going to go into the rest of the modules. So for our damage modules, you are going to want to take skill simplification for your attack module. Again, it does take away from our mana pool. However, it's going to give us the most damage on our 3 ability, and that is what we are trying to scale up as much as possible. Again, the mana loss does not matter whatsoever here, so definitely take skill simplification. And then also electric specialist, we just want to get as much damage as possible again. And you may be thinking, okay, well, what about the cooldown? You know, the base cooldown is 30 seconds, the duration's 20 seconds. Well, again, because we don't care about mana here, we can throw in MP conversion. We are losing mana, which again does nothing, but we're getting that cooldown. And what that's going to give us here is essentially a cooldown of 19.1 with a duration of 20 seconds. So our cooldowns taken care of. We have 100% uptime on our 3 ability just off of that mod alone. Now for our last damage mod, there is a couple options here. I like Dangerous Ambush. Now it's not super consistent. It really just depends on if you're in range of the mobs and if the mobs are looking at you or not, and if they're LOS. But I do like using Dangerous Ambush. It still works quite well. Another option you could use here is going to be Decimator. And the reason I'm not too big on Decimator is because, one, you only get stacks if you don't kill the enemy in one hit. So you would have to essentially hit them and then hit them again. And then once they die, you will get the stack. The other reason I don't like Decimator is because it snapshots based on whenever you use your 3 ability. So say you have 3 stacks of Decimator and then you use your 3 ability, the entire 20-second duration of that is only going to benefit off the 3 stacks you have. So it's pretty inconsistent. Not a huge fan of Decimator, but if you like it, it's something you could definitely use. However, if you're one-shotting the mobs, do not use Decimator. Now, Walk a Tightrope. You may be very curious about Walk a Tightrope. However, Walk a Tightrope actually does not work with Overwhelming Shield. So when you have Overwhelming Shield on, it does not count as you being below 50% HP. So Walk a Tightrope actually isn't going to work here. Now, I would also highly advise against dropping Overwhelming Shield because you are going to be significantly squishier. You are going to end up losing a ton of shield. I don't think it is worth it whatsoever. So I would definitely just go with Dangerous Ambush, or if you are not one-shotting the mobs, then Decimator is great as well. So in the case of like an invasion or something with tankier mobs, Decimator is definitely a valid choice, as well as when we get those new dungeons that are coming up with 400% difficulty with those tankier mobs, then Decimator may become a much better option. But again, you have to remember that it is snapshotting the amount of stacks that you have. And real simple for our last 2 mods, we're just going to be taking skill expansion and maximize range just to get that full range on our ability. So I'm sitting at 20.1 meters right now. The max is 21, so we're basically there. And now building off of that conversation of tankiness and sustain, we could actually use our inversion reinforcement to get quite a lot of help with that. There is some very good shield passives in here, so I'm going to go over that real quick. If you have your inversion abilities, then you have a couple good choices in here. Now the first one is going to be shield particle augmentation. Essentially what this does is just when you're killing enemies, you get bonus shield up to a max of about 33%. And this also lasts for 30 seconds. So as long as you're killing an enemy every 30 seconds, you're refreshing this. So you're just getting a lot of extra shield. So this is really good. Now, this is also really good recovery maneuver. And essentially when you use a grappling hook, it's going to grant you a recovery maneuver. What this does is it just regens your max shield by a bunch when you are actually using your grappling hook. Now it does have a 20-second cooldown, but it is a great emergency button. And it's also just a great way to kind of sustain yourself while you're running through dungeons and such. Whenever your shield is getting low, you can pop that grappling hook and get a lot of your shield back really fast. So this is also really nice. Now for your last passive, there isn't any amazing options here. Ideally, you would probably just pick one of these, whatever type of faction you are fighting. This would be your best bet here, is to just pick one of these and swap that around depending on the invasion or the dungeon or whatever you're doing. And with these, that will help a lot with your survivability and your sustain. So you can kind of see we're building that tank tankiness up, but there's actually more to it as well. Now, as far as your component set goes, I would highly recommend just sticking to Slayer set. It gives you a very good amount of shield as well as a very good amount of defense. It ends up being very tanky and also obviously giving you a ton of extra damage. And the skill cost is only going to affect your 3 ability. Overall, this set is very, very strong. If you don't go with this set, I would recommend just going with something where you're stacking shield to just be tankier and tankier. Otherwise, I would definitely just stick to the Slayer set. And the beauty of the Bionic Fuel Bunny is that you don't need mana rolls on your components. Now, what does that mean? It means we can roll element resists. Also, we can roll shield recovery modifier. Now, I actually do not like shield recovery modifier. The amounts are so low that I don't really think it's worth it. So I would personally recommend that you just roll resistance on all of your pieces. However, if you are going to roll anything for shield recovery, it would be a shield recovery modifier on your backpack. That's the only one I would really roll because it will help with the pickups that you get from a biosync shield. But aside from that, I really wouldn't recommend rolling like shield recovery in combat and shield recovery out of combat. So ideally on your components, you would have max health and fire resistance on your auxiliary power. On your sensor, mine is obviously not very good, but you essentially just want to try to get chill resistance here, and then shield recovery in combat would be the next role that you would want, but again, not very important. And on your Slayer memory, ideally you get defense as well as electric resist, but again, you can also roll that shield recovery modifier if you want, but I would definitely recommend just getting resist across the board. And then on your Slayer processor, I would definitely recommend getting max shield and toxin resistance. Then you really don't have to worry about resist. You're going to be a lot tankier against whatever you're fighting, including those pesky fire barrels that blow up on you. You will take less damage from them, so that's also really nice. And then just one other little option, if you want even more survivability, which I really don't think you're going to need it. I have not had any issues running all of this stuff together. It's a lot tankier than my other bunny builds, but you could throw in something like selective recovery. It's going to make it so those healing packs that you pick up off the ground are actually going to end up giving you more shield back, so that's pretty nice. And again, the MP recovery modifier minus does not matter whatsoever because we aren't using any mana. And you can also use just regular regeneration boost as well if you'd like. And now quickly going over the reactor, essentially you are going to want an electric singular reactor with a mounting. The mounting does matter because we are working with skill damage here. We want as much as possible. Now, as for the rolls, there's a couple things that you can go with here. I would definitely avoid crit though with this build because we aren't taking any sort of crit mods. So if you are going for damage, definitely go for a singular and electric power boost ratio. Some other things you could look for is skill range, and that's essentially going to take that 20 meters and make it 21 meters. So it's going to overcap a little bit, but if that is something you have, that wouldn't be too bad. But I would definitely recommend just going with the raw damage here like I have, which is the singular and electric skill boost. That's essentially just raw skill power. Now, the last important part of the build is actually going to be our weapon, and really it's only down to one mod, which is going to be our special mod. There's a couple options here. Now, the reason that this matters is because your special mod on Bunny actually activates when you are sprinting. So whatever mod you have on your weapon, that's a special mod, assuming it's applicable, will actually proc when you're hitting enemies with your 3 ability if you are sprinting, which you are going to be doing a lot on this build. So a great example of this is Brisk Walk. This will essentially make it so every 15 seconds you're getting a move speed buff of 10% for 5 seconds. So it's going to make up a little bit of that lost move speed that you get when you are using Bionic Fuel, because you do lose 20% using a Bionic Fuel. I really like using Brisk Walk just to have that extra mobility. It really helps. There is some other options you can put here as well. One would be Sweeping Squad. Now, this is more so if you're using your gun a lot. You will basically permanently have 3 stacks of Sweeping Squad just running around, and then you can get that extra bonus damage on your firearm whenever you're shooting something. So Sweeping Squad is also really good if you're using your gun a lot. If you are struggling, you can throw in Defense Master, and then whenever you kill something, you're going to get a big defense buff from your weapon itself, and that is about 67% uptime. So very good uptime on that. You'll be a lot tankier overall. Now, lastly, I did experiment with Remote Generator, but I found it very lackluster. The electrocution itself actually does 1 damage for some reason. It's really strange, but I definitely would not recommend using this mod. Your ability is already inflicting electrocution, so there's really no reason to have this. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear for y'all. Anyways, guys, that is gonna do it for this one. one. I do highly recommend this build if you have a couple spare catalysts to throw into it. I've found it to be the most comfortable farming build in the game by far. It works in all the dungeons, it works in the invasions, it works in all the open world missions. It's very, very comfortable and chill to use, and also very strong. And this is mainly due to the new mods and stuff that have come in, as well as the shield buff to overwhelming shield has made this a very viable build. And I have actually tested this against my high voltage build and speed running dungeons, and surprisingly enough, this has come out ahead in certain dungeons. It's very dependent on the boss at the end pretty much, but in general this has been very equal to the high voltage build, in some cases even faster, because you are just able to constantly sprint and jump around, and you just really don't have to ever worry about mana. So if you have to go from one room to another, there's a lot of kind of dead space in between. This will let you just run at Mach speed without any downsides. Anyways guys, that is going to do it for this one. Thank you all so much for watching. For those of you waiting on the Ajax build so patiently, that is coming up soon. I have the build done, it's ready to go. I just need to record the video, so stay tuned for that. I appreciate y'all's patience a lot, and shout out to my supporters on Patreon, shout out to my supporters in the Nexon Creator Program, and shout out to my Twitch subscribers as well. Thank you guys so much for the above and beyond support. It means the world to me, seriously. If you guys did like this video, please consider subscribing if you're not already. If not, no worries there. I hope that you enjoyed it. That is going to do it for this one, guys. I will catch you in the next one.